Hey everyone, Chris Lopez here, and today we're talking about an investment fourplex that we helped a client buy up in Longmont, Colorado. So my name is Chris Lopez. I was one of the agents on this deal. I'm an agent at Your Castle Real Estate, and I've got Preston Newberry on here, who's an agent helped out this deal as well. Preston, glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me back, Chris. Really looking forward to jumping into this one. We don't normally play outside of the metro area very much, so it was fun to get up north and do a deal up in Longmont.
Yeah, but when a deal this good falls in your lap, you find something to buy. Um, so the backstory here, so
Absolutely.
starting with the property itself, we said it's a great location. We really like Longmont because Longmont is really one of the last affordable parts of Boulder County. And so within Longmont, it's still expensive relative to a lot of the parts of the country, but relative to Boulder, it's definitely on the inexpensive or cheaper side. So it's in Longmont, which is I think has a great upside there. But then this fourplex is only a few blocks off of Main Street. So it's a really great location from there. If you guys have never been to Longmont, they've got a main street that runs up and down, all through Longmont. And it's just, if you're the closer you are to it, the better you are basically. So our client was looking for a fourplex in an up and coming area and hoping for just continued strong rental demand and also upside for some appreciation. And so a little bit about the investor's profile. This was not his first investment property, and he was currently house hacking. Where over 50% of his mortgage was paid for by his tenant that lived with him, but he did not want to move again and do the nomad process because he really liked his location, just awesome property he has and wanted to stay there. But he's done a couple real estate transactions in the past and had a good chunk of money that he wanted to use as a down payment. Now, what we did, he had a timeline of about 10 or so years out, give or take a year, where he wanted a certain cash flow number so that way he could do an early retirement. And then the properties, the rental income on the properties would cash flow and then bridge his early retirement up until he gets his full retirement, Social Security, all that, and then continue to make the real estate income. So we sat down, as we always do in our investing strategy sessions with our clients, and we mapped out the numbers. We said, great, you got this amount of money now. Here's your goal in 10 years. And basically the way it worked out was he could go out there and buy a fourplex now. And then based off his savings rates and some other cash coming available, he'd go out there and buy another fourplex in a couple of years. And then having two paid off fourplexes would be right around the number that he needs for his early retirement. So he ran some models and buying a fourplex now, then buying another fourplex in a couple of years. And then once he buys that second one, taking the cash flow from the properties along with some of the savings rate and start doing a debt snowball. So he would take all the cash flow and then pick one of the fourplexes, probably the one with the lowest loan balance, and then start paying down that debt aggressively to get that thing paid off, then pay that off, and then move on to the second property. And that should match with his timeline of doing an early retirement. Now, of course, we're doing all modeling on here, and it's our best guess. Will it work out perfectly in 10 years? Probably not, but it should be working out close enough or be within a year or so of that timeline because there's so many variables in there that we can't control. But it made sense for him from this standpoint to go and buy a property. Like a lot of our clients, he's busy. He does not want to go out there and do a bunch of rehabs. He just wanted a good property where he could invest some money and then play the longer financial game to make it hit his goals. So this property, like a lot of the multis, came through networking, and we did not go out there and specifically find this property for the client. As we always talk about, we're always out there networking with other agents, with investors, looking at the MLS, seeing what's coming up out there. Well, we had met with our client. We're getting things. We started hunting and looking for things, and then this came across our email inbox, and we were like, wow, this looks like a great deal. Because in addition to being the great location, this property also had a lot of renovations done to it, so lots of updates and lots of capital expenditure updates as well. So the layout of this place, 4 units, 2 of them are 2-bedroom, 1 bathrooms, and they are like townhouse style, so they have like a first and second floor. And then there's 2 units that are ground floor, and they're 1-bedroom, 1 bathroom units. So we got this through networking, and I know they were originally going to sell it for 950, maybe a little bit higher. We ended up going under contract around 925. So other things we liked about the property, they were in-unit washer and dryers. They were separately metered utilities, and there were 3 garages on the property there. So Preston, what was the contract like on this one?
This one was pretty straightforward. The nice thing about this property is they were actually just finishing up the rehab when it came across our desk. So we knew that there was a little bit of work left to do, and they still had some people up there. So, once we went up and toured the property, we were able to get into a couple of the units that were still vacant, and they were in the process of finishing those and getting them leased up. And so that gave us a little bit of traction to be able to work and negotiate on the price a little bit before we went under contract. So that was nice. Once we got under contract, as always, we did an inspection, and with most rehabs, you're always going to have some punch list items that need to be sorted out or taken care of. So we did find some stuff, but nothing crazy or outlandish, and the sellers were really willing to work with us and get that stuff repaired. The other thing that came up that was a little bit more of a major problem was some sewer repairs. And the funny thing about this is that the seller actually knew about the sewer repairs and thought that they had been done prior to us going under contract, and even to the point where the contractor had sent him a bill, but the work never actually got done. So kind of a funny little thing there, but we were able to get the sewer line repaired, and everybody was back to the races.
And the reason we found out it not been repaired is because even if it's a brand new sewer line that someone replaced, or you're going out there buying new construction, you always spend the $140 or whatever it is and go out there and do a sewer scope, because you always want to see what that sewer is like. So we're like, hey, normal stuff. We'll go out there, do inspection, do sewer scope. And, we told the sewer guy that, hey, it had been replaced. And he goes out there and he sends the video back where it's just crumbled at the end of it. And he's like, yeah, I don't think it's been replaced. And it was a pretty significant sewer repair because it was actually at the tap going under the road. And this was, not a busy road, but also wasn't a quiet residential street. So it had to bring in the city, and there's a lot more moving parts on there as well. Fortunately, the sellers did take care of it, which was really, really nice. So for financing, our client used a local bank, and he opted to go with the local bank and do a ARM product, so an adjustable rate mortgage, which requires 20% down. So with a big difference between local bank mortgages on 2 to 4 multi-property unit properties versus conventional 30-year fixed is that they can do 20% down on 2 to 4 units. So it gives you greater leverage because in a property like this, that's an extra 5% you're not bringing down. So that's another like $40-some thousand he's not bringing down. Well, that $40,000 is getting saved to buy Fourplex number 2 down the road. And so typically you see a 5-year or 7-year ARM. So you got 5 years or 7 years of a fixed interest or a fixed interest rate. And then after that 5 or 7 years, the rate adjusts. So some clients like it, some don't. Our client was all for doing an ARM product since his strategy was to acquire another property, and then go towards paying them off. And since there's a high likelihood that this is paid off within 10 years or so of purchasing the property, it gives them very low exposure to long-term interest rate risk in case for some reason interest rates spike in 7 years. Well, he's only got, $80,000 left on his principal or a small amount. Well, who cares if interest rate spikes because he's paying it off aggressively. Now, if you were doing that for 30 years, that might be a different story. So he was happy with it because he got to do a lower down payment to save an extra $40-some thousand for the next property, and also got a lower interest rate, which I think was right around 4%. We'll talk about that in a second. Appraisal came at value. Seller concessions, none. And on these types of rates, no rate buy down, or there's no PMI since he's putting down 20%. So plugging this into Joe Massey's rental spreadsheet, you can see here we put in 20% for the down payment range, put in $925 for the purchase price. Acquisition costs were probably about $15,000 or so, to give you a rough ballpark. No seller credits, no initial repairs. So for all in, he was in there for about $200,000. So, that is pretty great leverage on an asset that's almost $1 million. His interest rate was either at 4% or 4.125%. So we plugged in 4%, so very, very low. And then the rents I'm about to read off, they include the rents plus $100 a month per unit in rent utility bill back. So $1,650 plus $1,775 plus $1,725 plus $1,765. So altogether, that's about $6,900 in change in total rental income. So to underwrite it, we put in 5% vacancy, and then 3% rent increase, 3% appreciation rate. Going on to the next part of Joe's spreadsheet, we said yes to property management. And since this was in Longmont, a lot of our property management relationships, they don't manage in Longmont. So we started reaching out to our network. I had been talking with a company, and they do manage up there. And so they've actually got an option there where they can do a traditional percent rate, or they can do a flat rate. And so this property manager is GK Houses, and they did a flat rate of $109 per month. So what we did was $109 per month times 4 units, divide that into the total rental income, and it basically comes out to be about a 6.3% property management fee, which is usually that's a point or a little bit more than a point lower than a lot of times what we see. So for the spreadsheet, we rounded up to 8%, just to help cover any of those miscellaneous property management fees of lease ups and things like that. We always like to round up versus rounding down. So even though he's playing a flat rate, with our conservative underwriting, we put in 8% there. For monthly repairs and reserves, we put in 8%. Now, since this is a rehab property, we should hopefully be 5% or lower for the first couple of years. But you never know. There's stuff that always comes up. Even though it's a rehab property, there's always a few punch list items that fall through the cracks. You have tenants in there. Tenants, break things on purpose or by accident, whatever it is. So you're always going to have some repairs and maintenance. But over the long run, you're going to be closer to that 8% is a very common rule of thumb we see out here in Denver. So we plugged in 8% with the hopes that we'll be quite a bit lower the first few years. But again, better to be conservative than be too liberal with those underwriting assumptions. Taxes, about $3,400 a year. Property insurance is just under $1,900 a year. Now, I don't have the breakdown of the utility mix for the utilities on this property, but I was actually talking to the property manager a while ago, and he said it's pretty much about a break even from the utility bill back they collect with the fee with the landlord utilities that he's paying. So it's pretty much a wash. And that's the way it should be if you're charging RUBS to your tenants, is that's really meant to be not be a profit center, but to offset utilities that you're paying on their behalf for them to live on the property. And then we put in $1,000 for landscaping and snow removal because you do have to remove some snow, and then there's always landscaping to do. So about $1,000 a year to do that. Preston, am I forgetting anything on the underwriting here?
No, I think we hit all the topics here. I mean, the numbers look good. I know we chatted with the property manager to get a better idea on, if the RUBS were covering all the utilities. It sounds like they are. So I think we're pretty good here.
So going on to the cash flow analysis. So altogether, it should be right around $24,000 a year in expenses. Subtract that from the annual rents and RUBS, and you're at $54,000 in change. Subtract out the annual mortgage, and this will be principal and interest. That's about $42,000 a year. It's an annual cash flow before taxes of about $12,000 per year, or $1,000 a month. Now, if you look at that cash flow and the returns, keep in mind, we put in pretty conservative underwriting, especially for the repairs and maintenance, because, if we plug it at 8% for repairs and reserves, that's basically 1 month's worth of rents of about $6,000, whatever we said. So that's it's a good chunk of money, and there's always some repairs that pop up. But hopefully it might be a little bit lower, and it might be even more cash flow. But again, always better to be more conservative in your planning than not be. So with our numbers, that gives a 6% cash on cash return. And that's, definitely higher than we see for a lot of properties. And that's for two reasons. One, this was a better than average deal that we saw. And then also he was able to get more leverage. So the lower down you get, the better cash on cash return you're getting, because if he put 25% down versus 20%, he would have had $230,000 in the property. Well, that divided by the cash flow is going to give you a lower percent. But since he was able to get more leverage, he was able to get a 6% cash-on-cash return. So this also comes out to a 5.9 cap rate. So, I mean, this is basically about a 6 cap rate for a multifamily. So when you take it in the location, the conditions in, this was a really, really good deal. I really like this one. And so overall, you can see it's just a phenomenal play on there. And Preston, I mean, we talk about this a lot of times with clients. How would you explain the pros and cons of going through a local bank with an ARM product versus going through a conventional loan? Like, what are those pros and cons in your mind?
I mean, typically what you'll see with the local banks is they've got, a little bit different lending guidelines. So depending on the client's situation, they can be good or bad. They're a lot more relationship based, and they're, in it for the long haul. So, the downside is a lot of them are not going to offer you long-term financing, especially on, income property. So you're going to be looking at the 5, 7, 10-year ARMs. Whereas going with, traditional conventional lenders, you're going to be able to get a 30-year fixed product. But it's basically going to have to fit inside of the boxes of, the government-backed lending, Fannie, Freddie, whatever the case may be. So, you're still kind of depending on what your goals are, and the timeline will really depend on what route you go on the financing side.
Yeah, and like I said, just to wrap things up here, I mean, just to recap, this is a good property in a great location. And most importantly, it's a good fit for what the client's goals are, where he does not want a lot of work he has to do to take care of properties right now. Something he can easily hand over to a property manager and handle things through the property manager. But it makes sense with what his longer-term retirement plans are with real estate. So overall, great property, great fit for the client, and great location. So everyone, thank you for listening. Preston, thank you. And of course, if you guys have questions out there, you need help finding properties, analyzing properties, reach out to me, reach out to Preston. We're agents. This is what we do 7 days a week. So we always love helping people to do that. So go to denverinvestmentrealestate.com, reach out to us on there, and we'll be in touch. Have a great one, everyone.